Happy New Year to all my Magic the Gathering folks out there. And if you're ready for a better year of Magic, I mean, I know I am, I'm hoping for that, then leave a like on the video. Let's talk about 2024, a look back at some of the ban cards in the format and take a look at how we've evolved throughout the year, because I think it tells a story, how we can look towards 2025 as maybe a more positive year in constructed design, maybe a more dynamic year in Magic design overall, and maybe not only just sweeping changes in Magic, but in our individual formats that we love in Modern, in Pauper, in EDH, whatever it might be. So again, as the title and the thumbnail suggest, I want to take a look back at a year of bans and just go over how we've changed in terms of philosophy. Are we attacking these things long enough? And just kind of cement some of this stuff in everyone's mind. Let's remove the nostalgia glasses and take a peek back. Now, this all kind of comes from Saffron Olive's tweet here. We start a new year. What's your pick of Magic cards in the year? The best Magic card of 2024, and there's a lot of fun cards listed, and obviously I think the first one that's universally true, this is objectively true, the card of the year has to be the One Ring. I don't think you can actually make a legitimate argument for a card more impactful than this card this year. Yes, it's been almost 20 months, 19 to 20 months for the legality of this card. I believe it's 18 actually, if I do the math, but this card has been around since 2023, but has had such a big impact in every format as well. Very much played in Legacy, has some niche optionality in Vintage, banned in Modern, and just really draws the game along and just hones it in EDH for the first person to resolve their own copy. So the One Ring is the card of the year. I don't need to get into this too much, but this kind of reminded me, I mean, hey, this card got banned really recently, and we've had a crazy shift in mentality with unbans in Modern, and I think this is a good direction forward, especially with the big sweeping changes in the Commander community. I wanted to kind of take a look at those bans. So MTG Wiki actually has a pretty good list of this. I'm going to link this down below. So let's go through some kind of sweeping ones. Again, I'm largely going to be ignoring like kind of the arena formats and kind of Pioneer, not really the stuff I play. And the arena formats I play very much casually. I don't know if I want to get into them too deep from a content perspective. But Modern, we had some kind of sweeping changes recently, but I don't want to go into these just yet. We're going to start at kind of the beginning of the year. So 2024, Historic Show and Tell preemptively banned, fair enough. Modern Violent Outburst is banned. Vintage Ponder is unrestricted. Now Vintage I can't speak for too much, but Violent Outburst being banned is to attack the kind of Rhino strategy and just make it so this deck can't operate at instant speed. A large problem with this deck was the fact that with Force of Negation in the format, a really restrictive Force of Will, Violent Outburst being instant speed allowed you to go off, quote unquote, and have your combo go off with the protection of a Force of Will. And so doing this at instant speed really limited a lot of decks' options and just their ability to respond. Now, notably, later down the line in Modern Horizons 3, maybe with Consigned to Memory, things might have changed, but that would have also made like Consigned to Memory like a 4 of sideboard anyway in these decks. So, with the Violent Outburst Cascade being a trigger, the Consigned to Memory would be able to actually quote unquote counter the Violent Outburst in this sense. So Violent Outburst rightfully so banned. Right now the Cascade decks are very much sorcery speed. There actually are still some Rhinos decks top 8ing Modern challenges if you look through the recent results, and Living End is still doing quote unquote Living End things. Still very much a powerful deck in its own right. Historic updates here in May, we had some big changes as well. So all the sticker cards are banned in Vintage, Legacy, and in Pauper. So the Eternal formats, again, stop trying to argue with me that Modern is an Eternal format. It is not an Eternal format. It is a format that tries to mimic an Eternal format. Eternal literally means, Eternal format literally means all cards in Magic. These three are Eternal formats. The only one that is on top of this in terms of an officially sanctioned format is EDH. I'm not sure if Tiny Leaders is still an officially sanctioned format. I guess that would technically be an Eternal format, but All That Glitters notably is also banned. This was the most recent version of Affinity, if you can call it that. It really was Affinity. It wasn't some type of bogle stuff. You weren't adding enchantments to it, but it just made it so if you added like multiple All That Glitters, then like it counted each other and all that stuff. So All That Glitters Affinity, just putting it onto a Gingerbrute that was unblockable, just led to some ridiculously crazy starts that a lot of decks just couldn't beat in terms of power. Once they dealt with something like that, a lot of damage based removal is pretty relevant in the Pauper format, just nullifying all that, making black more powerful, but then also just forcing your opponent to have that removal spell was just like very problematic in general. All That Glitters is gone, and the sticker stuff is banned because there just wasn't a great way to one-for-one implement it. If y'all remember with like Name Sticker Goblin on MTGO versus real life, the logistics of bringing like a whole sticker deck and all that stuff in paper was really frustrating because Name Sticker Goblin was a legitimately good card in terms of the value proposition that it gave you for its mana cost. Name Sticker Goblin was very much powerful in the Pauper format, let alone Legacy. I can't speak for it in Vintage, but it was an option in all of those. So we have kind of some pre-bans in Historic, Brawl, Disruptor Flute. Now Pauper, this was a cool one. So this was notably a precedent set with Cranial Ram preemptively banned. Now, they talked about how they necessarily, like, they didn't want to set a precedent for this, but I think the Pauper format panel came together and actually made a really good decision. I think Cranial Ram at this point probably would have been banned in the later August if it was still let to be, definitely in the December banned and restricted announcement. Very powerful card, not so much played in Modern, where we're seeing a lot more affinity with the unbanned Mox Opal, which we're going to touch base on. But that is a format with a lot more robust kind of artifact hate. Now, the artifact hate that exists in Pauper is very kind of different. We have the tapped artifact bridges, so the artifact monkey isn't really relevant too much anymore. So it's more so shuffle effects and exile effects, but they are all still there. Cranial Ram provided this thing that was a little too powerful. Affinity just has a lot of card draw, has a lot of survivability, and so just being able to draw into the Cranial Ram is just really powerful. Even if you weren't able to attack with the Germ token, you could use it as a sack to a Deadly Dispute, still have the Cranial Ram to equip onto something else. Like, Cranial Ram is just a really powerful card, and so a preemptive ban really sets a precedent here. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to be one of those situations where we should look at, you know, kind of preemptively banning future cards. This is something that they're actively aware of, and they actually acknowledged this in a previous video from this announcement, talking about there is probably one card that they're really considering banning, and they ultimately came down on the fact that once it was spoiled, this was the card that was probably going to get banned. It's absolutely by a mile was an insane Magic card out of Modern Horizons 3 as a common, and so I'm very happy to see it kind of preemptively banned, make that decision. It does set a precedent for those bans, but it's really nice to see that they are actively aware, and they even acknowledged it beforehand. They were very aware of the power level, and they're willing to take action. So I actually take this as a good sign for the Pauper format panel. So shout out to Gavin and the team there. I really wanted to highlight that. And in August, we had a big shift. So Explorer and Pioneer functionally being the same format here, Amalia combo being absolutely just broken in that format, and then Sorin doing busted things as well. Both of those cards are gone out of that format. Legacy, we have Grief banned just out of the Dimir Reanimator shell that ultimately still went on to live on thanks to the likes of Psychic Frog. Essentially what happened was Psychic Frog being the central problematic threat as a card that proactively won the game, but also pitched a Force of Will and also pitched a Grief. Now with Psychic Frog gone later in the format, the Dimir Reanimator shell can't really be blue based because you lose 4 slots, 4 very powerful threats that are ultimately blue. So your ability to support Force of Will and Force of Negation really diminishes in that sense. And so in the iteration with Grief, you were very easily able to, with your Reanimator package, support Grief alongside the Frog, and then still be able to support like a Daze, Force of Will, Force Negation package alongside the Frog and many other blue cards that you were already playing. So Grief was a natural kind of ban in that format. No surprise that Modern Horizons cards still continue to stick around. Now in Modern, we saw Grief go as well. Very problematic card, should have been banned a long time ago. And so a lot of people are talking about, oh, should Fury be unbanned as well? No, that card also, to be fair, that card probably should have been banned at that point as well. It should have been Grief and Fury at the same time. Fury wasn't doing anything good either. And it's good to see Grief go in both of these formats. And obviously we had Nadu Winged Wisdom go as well in a format that just created a lot of like non-interactive games, very long games. And we had like Pro Tour coverage matches, competitive coverage matches where like judges had to come in, create little sliders of like, it was so hard to track this. This was the most miserable thing to play on MTGO as well, because it was so hard to track the cards that you had that were like attached once or twice, because ability only triggers twice each turn for each card on the battlefield. You'd add Shuko. And so it was very hard to tell. You actually couldn't tell on MTGO how many times a certain card on the field was triggered by Shuko. Was it triggered once? Was it triggered 0 times? Was it triggered 2 times? It's very annoying. So it just added to more clicking. Obviously you could just click through, but it just added to more clicking, a combo that just wasn't fun to play against. And then in Pauper, you had to organize it, right? Like you had to have the cards that were 0, 1, and 2. And you had to separate your battlefield into 3 spaces. And it was just very frustrating to see. This evoked the feeling of why like there's been a lot of eggs bans in the modern format as well. When it comes to coverage, when it comes to watching competitive Magic, these things just don't add to that experience. It was also a very powerful combo in terms of having that blue, having a lot of random green interaction as well. I mean, just being able to play main board endurance as part of your win condition. It evolved past needing Thassa's Oracle to the point where it just like kept going and had like a very elusive random win condition where it just kept looping its deck. I would say a lot of modern players now, a lot of Magic players now couldn't actually legitimately tell you what the Nadu loop was. And I would challenge y'all, without Googling it, no cheating, comment section down below, what was the final iteration of the Nadu combo? Can you explain the loop? I highly doubt anyone actually can without Googling what the loop was. I don't know, maybe prove me wrong in the comment section down below. But we saw both of those kind of go. And in Vintage, Urza Saga, rightfully so, in a format with the Moxen and Vexing Bauble, of course Urza Saga is going to go. This is, again, I love the way Boshin will actually put this in a recent video, but a lot of times like Urza Saga essentially represented one card that you always needed in that matchup, in that like you would play this on turn 1, and then this card always represents the one card you need in that matchup suspended by 2 turns. Right? Like you always play this on turn 1, you let your opponent develop, and you're like, okay, this is this matchup. I'm gonna grab this one specific main board card, and it's always just been on suspend 2. This card just represents the exact card you need in that matchup by suspend 2, because you need to go through the first counter, second counter, third counter, you get your card. It's uncounterable, technically, unless you have some type of stifle effect for the trigger of the 3rd stage. But again, it's a very good way to think about it. Very powerful card in the Vintage format with a lot of 0s and 1s. Vexing Bauble, rightfully so as well. Just a card that, like, ultimately, as we're going to see in the Legacy format, a card that was supposed to counter the unfair decks, but actually allowed the unfair decks to stop the fair decks from stopping them, because Legacy and Vintage, again, a lot of people don't understand this fundamentally. When I brought this up in my recent video talking about Screw Vexing Bauble, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, free spells, boo-hoo, people can't play fair Magic. That's the formats that you're used to playing. Legacy and Vintage, with the history of Magic, is operating on the axis of free spells in a fair way. The fair decks are playing the free spells to counter the even more broken things that you could be doing with other spells that exist throughout Magic's history. It's just even beyond free. Like, it's like, imagine casting a spell for free. That's broken. Eternal formats operate in a way where you don't even need to cast spells. You cast one spell and 50 things happen. Just go look at Legacy Oops All spells. I don't like that deck is like beyond free spells, right? Like, at least with into Vexing Bauble, you have to cast those spells into this. Vexing Bauble allows you to stop the fair decks that are stopping you, and then it allows you to do the broken things. And when you're ready to combo off, you just pay 1 mana, draw a card, and sacrifice it. When you're ready to combo off, you just let go of it, which is going to be a theme that we see in the Legacy format. So good to see that go in Vintage. Definitely not a format that wanted either one of these cards at all. And so this is when they announced that they changed the cadence to the ban and restricted announcement. Still a controversial take. I'm not sure if this is correct to do for many formats. Like, I don't know why, like, the Pauper format, Vintage format, and the Legacy format, heck, even the EDH format, but probably not so much tied to this. They'll probably still ban that separately, but I don't know why those 3 constructed formats are tied to the modern RCQ season. Again, a Legacy and Vintage format, and Pauper could be as well, but they don't want to, even though Pauper is an official format. Legacy and Vintage, not Pro Tour formats. We're not going to get Pro Tour Vintage anytime soon. Why are they tied to like RCQ seasons, right? Like, I get it's a logistical thing. it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Honestly, as I've said in many of my Pauper videos, when are we getting a Pauper Pro Tour? People will come. Pauper Get In and many other European events, we see that people want to play Pauper. The children yearn for not only the mines, but they yearn for the Pauper Pro Tours as well. When are we getting large-scale Wizards-sanctioned official Pauper tournaments? Just asking, all right? September, we get the huge, this was probably going to be the biggest ban of the year, if not for the December ban. I would argue the modern ban in December is actually bigger than this, but maybe that's biased as a constructed player. This September ban affected more people. We can say that Commander is the most played format. This affected more people, but I think in terms of a fundamental shift in ideology and the amount of effect that it had on a singular format, I would argue the December ban on Modern and the unban had a larger effect, but this had a larger effect on people. So you could probably say that this is the biggest ban of the year. Commander, we see Dockside Extortionist, Jewel Lotus, Mana Crypt, and Nadu Winged Wisdom gone out of the format. Nadu for very similar reasons as to why it was banned in Modern, just very impressive commander in the EDH format, but also it just led to these large, like non-deterministic, like quote unquote wins. Like you didn't even win. Sometimes you just take like 30-minute turns and you wouldn't win. You just get so much value that you like functionally won because you had so many cards in your hand and so many lands on the battlefield. Like you would pretty much just untap with like so many resources. Why wouldn't you win? Mana Crypt, Jewel Lotus, and Dockside Extortionist, very controversial cards. Dockside Extortionist primarily being red, but pretty much being a staple in those colors. A lot of people would argue that these cards, like in a format that's so self-regulating, it's so hard to justify a ban. And I kind of see that, I kind of understand that argument as well, that like because you can't justify a ban, really, should you ban anything? I think there should be some type of statement made. I'm just not sure if these were the correct bans. Ultimately, they're banned. I'm not too mad. People talked about like money being lost. Ultimately, a bunch of losers also were threatening people's lives. And then because of that, the monkey's paw curled and we got Wizards now handling the ban and restricted list for all formats. Now the Commander ban list is not taken up by a party outside of Wizards of the Coast, but exclusively by Wizards of the Coast. So they're going to be managing that. Will we be seeing some unbans? They mentioned they might be looking into that. There are plenty of unbans that could happen in the in this format. Coalition Victory is definitely one of them. I will stand 10 toes on that. 10 toes Coalition Victory needs to be unbanned. If you think so, you are in. If you don't think that card needs to be unbanned, you genuinely don't play enough Commander. I'm calling you out right now. I don't think you have any idea about how Commander works at all if you think Coalition Victory cannot be unbanned in the format. And then people's garbage argument of like, does this add anything to the format? Okay, there are so many cards in Commander that don't add anything positive to the format. Why haven't we banned Rhystic Study? Rhystic Study adds nothing good to the format. Pay the one, get out of here. There's so many cards on this ban list that could be banned off. All these softies in my comments talking about like, oh, you know, keep this ban, whatever. The Mana Crypt argument, I like the Mana Crypt argument and technically the Jewel Lotus argument as well, because it led to these games where one player who drew it got so far ahead and so early that it just made it so it was hard to come back from. And this isn't exclusively a CEDH argument. Obviously, if you're playing Jewel Lotus and Mana Crypt, you are on average playing a higher power strategy. But when it came to those players that got it off on turn 1 and turn 2, you were just way far ahead. You had your commander out instantly. You had a combo going instantly. It just gave you that type of value. But there are other cards that do that as well. When you play the One Ring, when you play certain like large green creatures, yeah, things get pretty crazy. But generally speaking, there's a lot of build up to those type of cards. The One Ring does cost a significant amount of mana for what I would consider an EDH game to be, right? It takes a long time to get back to your turn. Pretty televised. Once you get that out there, 3 players are now going to immediately focus on you, whereas Jewel Lotus and Mana Crypt had that immediate value. If you had it in your opening hand, you were doing something busted immediately before people could even establish resources most of the time. Now in CDH, that is very different in an environment where a lot more people will likely have answers and counter spells and stops to what you're doing. In a high power game that's maybe like in an 8 to 9 power scale using the old 10 power scale, people may not have that, and so these things ran away with the game. Dockside Extortionist was kind of more so seen as like a comeback mechanic. A lot of times in CDH games, like if you're the last person, Dockside Extortionist almost like softly solved the last person problem, where like the third or fourth person in the pod just is so behind in terms of timing and resources. It's just like they're able to establish less. Like a Dockside Extortionist played by the third or fourth player could largely like come back based on average the amount of artifacts that are played early on in the game. This one I agree with less. Nadu, sure. Jewel Lotus and Mana Crypt sure lost a lot of people money, but like to the people that were really holding 8 Mana Crypts, why were you doing that? Why were you doing that? The format you're playing, even in CDH, allows for proxies, and you already just keep one. Just keep one. Like I don't sympathize for the people that had like 5 to 8 copies of Jewel Lotus and Mana Crypt and were just holding them for money. You deserve to lose that. You deserve to lose that. Okay, like I don't know why you're holding all that. Okay, and you are mad. To the people that are holding that and weren't upset, okay, cool, whatever. At this point, due to like finance and weird exclusivity or whatever, they probably went up in price. You could actually probably still sell them for whatever. But at this point, I don't know why y'all are mad about it. Y'all probably deserve to lose that. Arena Standard and Alchemy in October. November, Alchemy and Historic. And in December, oh baby, recently, the big banned and restricted change. Okay. Explorer and Pioneer, we saw Gigantagon. All right, they just the even in its fixed form, the companion mechanic cannot beat the allegations. Cannot beat the busted allegations. Let's touch on Legacy before we get to Modern. So Psychic Frog and Vexing Bauble, as I was mentioning, for many of the reasons I was talking about, I already went on a spiel about Psychic Frog and Vexing Bauble. Vexing Bauble allowed the broken decks to do the busted things against the fair decks that operated on an axis of free spells. But the problem is with these Eternal formats, it's not even just about free spells. You are able to do things for free without even casting spells, which is why the free spells are quote unquote fair. You just have cards entering the battlefield by just doing anything. You could breathe and all of a sudden your whole graveyard's back. Just again, go play Oops All Spells, go play random dredge decks, go play vintage whatever, right? Like you could just and then you win. That's it, right? Like that is what the busted decks do, because old Magic design is absolutely insane. And so free spells are considered fair because you still have to have the resource of having that card in your hand. That is a legitimate cost to having that card, casting that card, because now you can't stop the future busted thing that they try and do. You just have to stop the first instance and hope that they used enough resources, you timed it well enough to stop them. Vexing Bauble prevented that from happening. As someone who's getting into the Legacy format, very much so with something like Painter, I loved Vexing Bauble, but I'm happy to still abuse that, you know, kind of I win button, that mid-range tempo tutor deck with an I win button without Vexing Bauble because of the angles that I still have. Regardless, I'm happy that card is gone out of Legacy format. Now, Psychic Frog, rightfully so, also needs to be banned to further make it harder for the Dimir decks to support a Reanimator shell on top of Force of Will and, you know, Force of Negation, Daze, whatever. Just not having that blue card, 4 copies of a blue card, just make it that much harder. The Reanimator decks of old, there were some Dimir versions, but largely tended to be like Black X. And so you use like Thoughtseize effects, like the free Thoughtseize, to take a peek at your opponent's hand, see if they, you know, kind of had the stop for you, what that stop was, whatever it was, and then kind of take it from there. And a lot of times you may actually opt to counter that Thoughtseize to preserve information and all that stuff. So a lot of these type of things, you know, banning Psychic Frog, get it out of there. Just very powerful threat in general, even when it resolved. Just get it out of there, right? It was also, I should notably talk about how Psychic Frog also, when it was on the field, a big problem with Reanimator was that if you drew your reanimation target, it was near impossible to get out of your hand. You had to Thoughtseize it out of your hand. Psychic Frog just gets it out of your hand. Psychic Frog allows you to discard the card, buffs the Psychic Frog, and then draws you a card, and that card drawn could just be the Reanimate. It did everything the Reanimate deck wanted to do. So just out of the format. Now the Modern ban and restricted announcement. Okay. Ooh. Okay. Amped Raptor gone. We can all agree at this point, this did not solve anything. The energy deck is still the best deck in Modern. So come March, the end of the next RCQ season, I imagine we will see Guide of Souls, something like that, get banned. Galvanic Discharge, not the ban. The one mana O-Ring, probably not the ban either. It's probably God of Souls in terms of how it generates mana resources and energy continuously. Ampraptor was fair enough. That's a good ban. It just didn't do enough. Now Giganta again can't beat the allegations, and the One Ring is banned. Now this will not stop this will not stop the rising like invisible price of Post Malone's copy of the One Ring. It is still very much played in some Eternal formats, and in the most important format, as it is the most played format out there, EDH. And so it will still continue to hold its price as the one of one. And so it's gone in Modern, rightfully so, a card that universally exists everywhere. I think many of you watching this video already are well aware of the power of the One Ring. So I'm not going to go too far into that. Just again, we'll probably, okay, why is Firefox not responding? Okay, wow, that was a moment. Just is probably going to be the card of the year. Whenever you think back to 2024, if you say anything other than the One Ring, I'm just going to assume you're naming a pet card or just like memeing. The One Ring is the card of the year. In terms of unbans, we got the old guard of Modern back. I couldn't be happier. This unban announcement, actually, I feel like I was the Grinch complaining in all of my videos, and I just got so much more positive. Like, I feel like my outlook on life improved with this unban. Like my faith in Wizards of the Coast and the Modern format changed, even though Modern Horizons is still taking over, fundamentally breaking and destroying the format that we love. I don't care, because in like protest to those cards, I can still fight those cards with some Modern Horizons cards, but with the power of what was old and existed in the Modern format. Faithless Looting, re-enabling every single graveyard strategy out there again. For those of you watching this, I will probably be playing Dredge or Hollow One at some point this weekend. It might actually be, I don't know, I will probably be playing it at some point. I'm just so excited to be playing a ton of Modern. We might get 4 gameplay videos. Let me know if you're this far in the video. Comment down below if you want to see 4 gameplay videos this week. I've been trying to do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I might do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Do some Dredge, Hollow One. Get some mill out there. Get some legacy out there. Let me know what you want to see. But Faithless Looting, re-enabling all the graveyard strategies. Green Sun Zenith not actually being as busted as many people thought. Largely enabling the Titan strategies right now, but in many ways just very fixed. The green based combo strategies not that existent. The biggest one is Yawgmoth, but in many ways, like, Green Sun Zenith can't get like half of the Yawgmoth deck, which is important. So Green Sun Zenith still really powerful, just a nice great piece that adds to a lot of creature toolbox options that those decks can now play, which is great. Mox Opal largely being held back. This card really only helps combo at this point. The affinity decks being held back by Meltdown and so much other colorless artifact based hate that not only incidentally existed but also got printed alongside Modern Horizons 3. Now, Splinter Twin, probably the safest unban that many of us were correct on throughout Modern's history. This card is largely doing nothing in the Modern format, and I shouldn't underplay too much. It does have a small representation of it. It is still a card that represents an I win button. It just doesn't do as many busted things as possible. I mean, again, just highlighting Consign to Memory as an insane sideboard card. Not only is the Cascade trigger a trigger that you can counter with that, Storm is also a trigger that you can counter with Consign to Memory. Splinter Twin can also uniquely be countered because once you attach Splinter Twin onto your Pestermite, you activate that Pestermite, you create a copy, that Pestermite enters, you counter the trigger, the enters the battlefield trigger, untapping the original Pestermite with your Consign to Memory. So you can counter the Splinter Twin combo with your Consign to Memory. So not only does that just delay it for a turn, but sometimes that's all you need, because maybe you tapped out and then you can untap, get some removal, draw, find something, and then you're able to kind of react. Because even if your opponent has multiple counter spells, once they go to counter again, even if you draw into another Consign, you just play Consign with this replicate cost, and then they have to counter 3 individual like instances of that counter. So hey, that's also an option as well. Splinter Twin, safe unban. Faithless Looting, likely in contention with Mox Opal to be the most broken, impactful unban. I think Mox Opal still sneaks it past. It probably still is the most broken unban. Green Sun Zenith and Splinter Twin being super safe. Really happy to see these unbans, and I think this unban is largely why I'm really excited and really happy to see where constructed formats go in 2024. I'm looking forward to more unbans in March. Maybe even Birthing Pod gets unbanned. We might see the return of a Glimpse of Nature because Orcish Bowmasters is legal in the format. Like, there are so many cards that could come off the Modern ban list based on the recent just power scale change of Modern Horizons entering the format. And I think it's just the format's only benefit from having that ban list reduce to just add more gameplay options, right? Like these cards made archetypes. They largely define archetypes. Splinter Twin literally added a net new deck into the format. Faithless Looting literally added net old decks into the format, made them more viable. Like Dredge is now a playable deck. I mean, it was in the One Ring era because a lot of decks were just playing mid-range on the battlefield. No more Graveyard. Hey, Dredge actually was being played to a significant amount during the One Ring days before it got rebanned. But Faithless Looting does make whole strategies like Arclight Phoenix really viable in the modern format. Mox Opal brings back Affinity in such a big way, but combo still, and Green Sun Zenith Axe to supplement some of these strategies. So again, I mentioned this 2 or 3 times. I'm so excited for the modern format. I'm so excited to just be playing constructed Magic. It feels like a really cool time to just be playing Magic in general, with 2025 bringing about a new era of Magic with the Universes Beyond. I'm excited to see how those cards ultimately implement. I think a lot more people will be playing standard and just a lot more constructed formats because of the universal legality of all those cards. It won't just be, oh, these cards are going to be, primarily in EDH, and they might see some niche play in Legacy. You have to pick up those commander deck boxes. Like they're going to be available in standard legal sets, which I think logistically is very great, because if they are powerful, they're going to be universally available at the standard level all the way up to the vintage level, and they're going to be very easy to access and hopefully relatively cheap based on their printing. So a lot of these cards can hopefully be picked up, and I'm looking forward to more unbans, more Magic, and just enjoying the game again. I feel like my outlook on this game, based on these changes, based on the things that they've done, has really changed, and I'm just so happy to see an unban philosophy come out of Wizards of the Coast. So I'm just really excited to see that. Some of the final things that I wanted to touch on really are just like touching on the Pauper format, something that like Jake touched on here. I got some feedback, I've been watching some of his gameplay videos. I got some feedback that people are tired of watching Storm decks, but have another idea, recorded version of Ruby Storm, and got a 4-1 video up soon. I mean, rightfully so. The Pauper format probably needed a ban, if I'm going to be honest. The format is so fast right now that it's actually like combo heaven. If you want to beat Burn, if you want to beat Pauper Splinter Twin in the Brute Scale combo, you just have to be faster, right? You just have to gain 1 million life, be a hard control deck, or just be faster. And that's what Affinity can do. Affinity just has busted starts, has that interaction, has that aggression. Affinity always has in every iteration of the Pauper format. But past that, you're looking at like Dimir Control, or you're probably playing some type of combo. If you're looking to beat like the best deck in the format, Burn, you could do that. Like that's why like Bogles is really good, because once you just get like some type of lifelink on there, you become unbeatable. But against like many other of the format staple decks, you might not be able to get them as fast. So it really depends on how you look at the format. I'm excited to play Pauper generally because it's combo heaven, but I can understand from a viewer perspective, it's not that great. So I think the Pauper format panel probably has to take a good look at the play rates in Pauper right now, how many people are getting into the challenges. As soon as we start getting into this world where like Pauper challenges aren't firing and all that stuff, there probably needs to be like an immediate change. And I think similar to the modern format, I think we should not only look at bans, but look at some potential unbans. They were talking about High Tide and the other discard card that I'm forgetting about, but taking a look at unbans in the Pauper format can not only reinvigorate, but also bring some people back to try some cool stuff and get some eyes onto the format. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. I think Pauper does need a change, especially, we're getting some big Pauper creators talking about how, people complaining about viewership and stuff, the decks being played. These are the viable decks. Let's make a change. Now, last thing, I wanted to highlight the fact that such a funny card when you make a lot of mana. Shout out to Doppelgang for like single-handedly being responsible for just breaking so many arena client games out there. When you Doppelgang for like a crazy amount onto like some creatures, like this card is breaking your literal client. So, you commuting on the train to work, resolving a giant Doppelgang and just breaking your connection and everything. Like, I love it. I love it. So shout out to that card. But, hey, what's your pick for Magic card of the year? I would love to hear your argument for something that isn't the One Ring. And what are your thoughts on this year in bans? Are you generally excited for 2025? Are you looking forward to playing another year of Magic? Are you scared about Universes Beyond? Are you just in general, like, are you surprised with the, pre-bans in Pauper and the unban philosophy, the switch, and being more open to community feedback out of the kind of constructed ban and restricted team? And are you looking looking forward to the EDH changes in the new power scaling and where the format is going to be taken in terms of unbans. Sound off down below. Let me know in the comment section, and just excited for, honestly, like I think a lot of people might take this as a complaining video, but I hope all of you that have watched this far can maybe defend me in the comments here for all those people complaining. Like, I'm just looking forward to another year of Magic, and with a lot of the recent changes, I'm so excited to be playing this game.